Hello. Thank you for joining us. It's quite early, so I'm going to wait the 10 minutes until ish. I might then give it another minute or so for people who could be joining us late. So I'll just go silent for the meantime and put up the start of the presentation. And then we'll get going. Thanks very much. Hello, if you've joined us. I just said before, we're just going to wait until 1:30 and then we are going to try and make a start. Hello, if you've just joined us, we're just going to wait until past, and then we will try and make a start. Hi, everyone that's tuned in. We're just going to give it a couple more minutes, so we'll wait until past, and then we'll get going. Hi everyone, we are nearly about to start. I just want to wait until 1:30 and then we'll get going, and I will introduce myself, and it shouldn't take up too much time. It's just a good way to get to know the program. So just a minute or two more. Thank you. Okay, so we are on time, and I guess given technology, people can always go back and rewind and start things again. So I'm not going to wait too much longer. In fact, I think we'll get started now. Now, firstly, I should apologize. This is one of the more awkward things I've done. But one of the things we find is we try and go around the country for info evenings or parents' evenings or whatever. Is that it misses a lot of people out. We can't just assume everyone's in North Manchester, Leeds, and North London, or available when we want them to be available. So that's why we're going to do it like this. It's the first time we've tried something like this. So please do pass on any feedback that you might have. And also please just bear with if it's a little bit clunkier than we'd like it to be. The plan for the next kind of 45 minutes or so, and I doubt that it would take up longer than that, is for me just to go over the Israel Tour program. I will try and give you as much of the details as I can, but please note that this isn't the session that talks about things like travel insurance and what to bring in the suitcase. There is that, and that might come a lot later in the year, sometime around May, normally April or May, maybe even June. This instead is just about people who maybe don't know what they're going to do next summer, and it's a good way, I think, to just understand a little bit about the program. So with that said, I'm going to kind of launch into it. Now, what should happen, fingers crossed, is you will be able to carry on hearing me, and I'll kind of show you the presentation as we're going. And every now and then I will pop back so that you can see my face. Now, if you are watching this on YouTube, there is a little chat thing on the right-hand side, so you can always ask questions there, and I will take questions mostly at the end. Sorry, alternatively, if you are watching on the website, then well done you, because I actually couldn't get that to go. So thank you for kind of tuning in, and we'll get started. So just one moment. Okay, excellent. So what you should be seeing now is just kind of the overview of what's going to happen in the session. If it's a bit blurry, just leave it for a moment and it will kind of come a little bit into some better clarity. The plan is I will give a bit of an overview about who we are and things like that. We'll talk a bit across the top line about what a day on Israel Tour is like, or a week on Israel Tour. Then there is a video which, because we're streaming it online, I won't show you, and instead I'll just put it in the comments below so that you could watch that video anytime. It's just kind of from this summer or the year before, and it just gives a bit of a flavor of like the program. After that, I'll talk a little bit about the kind of support structure we have in place during the program, who our staff are, how they're trained, that kind of thing. I'm going to look at two or three of the frequently asked questions, and basically they are, what's the food like and the accommodation like, and also kind of how can I be in the same group as my friends, or You know, what if I don't want to be with my friends? And then at the very end, I will do a little bit of the boring kind of dates and details and things like that. And I will talk a little bit about the Maccabea, which for some people is a bit of a highlight. So that's the plan. And fingers crossed this works and we can get started. So I guess, yes, nice to meet you. I am, or meet you. I'm Josh, and I'm the tour coordinator at FZY, which means that I do, you know, amongst some of the work that I do, like most of it is about Israel Tour. I went on Israel Tour with FZY in 2011. And since then, I've led the program twice. And this is my second year in the role as well. It's normally just a one-year role. So I had the experience of last summer, and hopefully to kind of learn upon and build upon that, I'm ready for this summer. So before I go any further, I just wanted to talk a little bit about FZY and who we are. So we are the UK's oldest Jewish, Zionist and pluralist youth movement. We were founded in 1910. Since then, we've gone on to do a number of different things, not least kind of summer camps and Israel tours, but also, you know, huge campaigns over the years. And we've had people go on to become deputy prime minister in Israel and onto other similar roles. So we are kind of an old and pluralist youth movement. And I'll talk about pluralism a little bit more in the moment. But before that, I just want to talk about who our partners are a little bit for Israel Tour. So all of the Israel tours in the UK are run kind of in coordination with UJA Israel Experience, which is a branch of the Jewish Agency for Israel. On top of that, we actually have two quite specific partners during the program. Our land provider on the ground in Israel, who are responsible for things like booking hostel rooms and coaches and things like that, is called Young Judea. And we also have a sibling movement in Israel called the Sofim, or the Israeli Scouts. And some of the Israelis from the Sofim join the program at different times. The only other time that that's really important, which I'll talk about a bit later, is the Maccabea, which is where the groups from these three organizations all meet up together. And it's kind of, for a lot of people, it's a big highlight. But more on that in a moment. And before that, like I said, I talk a little bit about pluralism. You'll see that there are 3 bullet points. One is pluralism as a value, and then there's Shabbat and Kashrut. And the reason that there's 3 is because pluralism means different things. So for FZY, it means we have this firm belief that we don't tell you what to believe on Israel Tour, or how to pray, or that you have to do this, or you have to believe in this or that. And the same goes kind of politically as well. We don't tell you who's right and who's not right. Our value is that kind of if you bring people together from a broad enough range of backgrounds and beliefs, what you really get is kind of like a thriving community. And really that's what we think we've built, both on Israel Tour as a program, but also when, and I'm sure like many of the people watching, that you or your kids, it depends what age you are, will stick with us afterwards. You'll find out that like it's a really thriving community of people who actually fundamentally disagree, and that's sometimes why it's like such a lovely space to be in. And then the reason why it says Shabbat and Kashrut is because people say, right, so what are the rules? And I guess we don't tell people what to believe or how to pray or anything like that. But what we do out of respect, both for like our tradition and for the many people in our program who are either more Orthodox and or more religious, on Shabbat, we do all of our programming that's on Shabbat is Shabbat friendly by halachic standards. And likewise, all the food we serve is kosher, kind of certified kosher throughout the whole program. It's not, by the way, vegetarian, so it's kosher, meaty. But the one thing I should say is that people may choose in their kind of free time or with their own money to buy non-kosher food, the same way that people don't have to keep Shabbat during the program, only that, you know, in public, or that anything we do as an organization, as a movement, is Shabbat friendly. So I hope that sort of makes sense. Let's move on. So the way this used to be done, it was kind of like quite like detail oriented, but I just want to talk a little bit now about kind of like a day on Israel Tour. And I will put my face back just for a moment, just to check that it's still working. Sorry, this is more for me than it is for you. So what we used to do with Israel Tour, with No, one thing I was going to say, I guess, is that when we look at like a day on Israel tour, it's worth bearing in mind that there are like so many different kinds of days. There are the ones that people are up early to hike, or the ones that people are up later, but then up later in the evening for a free evening in Jerusalem, or this and that. So it was hard to find like a typical day. I tried to find one that was a real day, and that some of the groups did last summer. So I'm going to show that to you now. And I just thought that would be like a helpful exercise for people to understand kind of what it's like on Israel tour sometimes. So a day on Israel tour is a bit like this. You normally wake up around 7 or 7:30, which I know feels a bit early, especially for a summer. But I guess Israel Tour is not a holiday in that sense. It's like it's a rigorous program. At the same time, it's like later than school mornings. And then something like a quick breakfast. Breakfast is almost exclusively at the hostels. And normally the hostels are quite good at serving just a big buffet breakfast, and people can kind of take what they want. And then everyone on the coach and drive to a town like Ramleh and might have a tour of the arches there, or something that's a bit kind of active in the morning. So if you look at the photo, that's actually from the group that went there this year. And it's these arches that are kind of like submerged in a well that's ancient and underground, and they had a chance to kind of row around, which I actually thought was really cool. And it's something that more groups are going to do next year. So that would be like your average morning. It's normally up early and then something active. And quite often that activity could be something like this that I'm showing you, but it could also include things like hikes or kayaking or abseiling, something quite outdoors. And we try and get that done early in the day before it gets too hot. Lunchtime works in a few different ways. So the one that this group had on that day, they went for pizur lunch in the shuk. Pizur is what happens when we provide kind of 3 meals a day. All of them are certified kosher. And whenever we're not providing a meal, what we do instead is we give everyone the kind of the cash equivalent in shekels. And we say that they're free to go out and get their own meal. And they go in groups, and we show them where they can go in the market. And it's a good way for them to feel that they're having a bit more free time and exploring a place. And also it's a good way for people to choose their own food if eaters are a little bit fussier. There were 2 groups kind of did this day last year. One went to the Olympic experience in Tel Aviv, which is sort of like an interactive museum. It's really cool. I've done it a couple of times. It's like very difficult to describe. You go into these different rooms. It's very hands-on. It's like a very creative museum. And the second group went to the Weizmann Institute for Science, which is also, I guess, a very creative place. It's like an outdoor science park. And they've got these really cool tour guides there, and they get some amazing work done there. And then what they also did in the afternoon, so you can see that the days are really kind of packed, is they drove to the nearby Save a Child's Heart. It's a charity that we are supporting at the moment in Israel, who take young people who need life-saving cardiac surgery from around the world, and they give it to them for free. Normally these people come from the third world, and they're quite young, and because it takes them quite a long time to recover, they live in the Save a Child's Heart place in Israel. And our groups go and they make sure that these kids aren't too bored, and they play with them and they get to meet them and stuff. And it's a really fascinating experience. So that's kind of what they did that afternoon. And then if we look at the evening was kind of like a 40-minute bus drive back to the accommodation in Jerusalem. Dinner is, again, kind of like breakfast. It's more like served at the hostel. It's a bit of a buffet. And most evenings end with kind of free time until around midnight. We leave it up to the Madrachem about kind of what sort of, the leaders that is, about what sort of rules to have about things like curfew and bedtime and things like that. We do say that in that free time, they can't leave the hostel, kind of for obvious reasons. But people kind of will often chill outside until they get exhausted enough that they have to go to sleep. Sometime around midnight, we kind of send everyone not to sleep, but at least to their rooms, just so that they can get enough sleep for the following day. So that's really how it works. And it's a bit flexible with things like different times on Shabbat or before a morning hike or that kind of thing. But that's broadly how it works. If we move on, I know this may seem kind of repetitive, I'll just get through this a bit quicker, but I wanted to look at a week on Israel tour, and this is a real one from last summer. I just thought it was a useful experience for people to kind of just see how packed the the schedulers. And, you know, it could have been any week. It so happens that actually this week they are staying in 3 different places, which is fairly typical. On the Sunday night, they're staying in Bedouin Hospitality, which is normally like a desert, large enough desert tent. They have kind of on-site bathroom and facilities and stuff, but it's in a separate block. And then they stay for 3 nights in a hostel in Jerusalem, and then for 3 nights in a hostel in Rishon LeZion, which is also in the center. I won't talk through every detail, but you can just get a bit of an idea of how much the groups do on a single day. And there's some really cool stuff here, and it's quite varied as well. So you'll see that there are things like camel riding on the same day as touring Sderot, which is quite near the Gaza Strip. It's like a really interesting place. Or equally, that kind of you have the tour of the city of David in Jerusalem the same day as they go and visit Yad Vashem, or they go hiking on the Thursday morning. And then the Friday morning, they even get across to Tel Aviv, have a tour of Tel Aviv before Shabbat. And Shabbat is broadly the same each week. I mean, it might depend on where they're staying, but we try and do loads of kind of Shabbat-friendly activities. It says FZY services. The way we do it is, as a pluralist movement, we don't, you know, force people to believe one thing or another. We do an orthodox, a reform/egalitarian, and an alternative service. And the alternative one could be anything from meditation to yoga to discussion or whatever, as long as it's something that kind of marks out from the rest of the week. And people can choose where they want to be. And in that way, we don't really want people to compromise their beliefs. They're free to try new things, but we don't want people to feel that they're kind of in a place of compromise. But we do have a nice communal Shabbat dinner and Shabbat lunch all together, the same for Havdalah or like Suda Shlishit, which is the 3rd meal on Shabbat. We try and create like a nice Shabbat inclusive space, which is, you know, allow people to choose their different ways of, I guess, worship over Shabbat. So if we move on from that, and the next thing was going to be the video break. I'll just skip it a little bit, and I will send it in as a comment at the end of this, and that just will allow people to, if they want to watch the video from last year, to do so, and people are more than welcome to do so. And now a bit instead, I want to talk a little bit, as we've done some of the content, I just want to talk a little bit instead about some of the structure of the program. And in that sense, in particular, I want to talk about kind of like the welfare, the way we do like safety and security, the way we support participants, the way we talk to parents. And I've kind of split it up into 4 different themes, and I will try and get through them now. So the first thing I want to talk about is safety and security. So all FZY Israel Experience Israel Tours, for all of them, the safety and security is in line with 2 organizations called Cheder Matzav, which is like the Situation Room, and Moked Teva, which is a branch of Israel's kind of Society for the Protection of Nature. And those 2 organizations get to see things like, they get to see a schedule in advance, but also each morning before the group leaves the hostel, they have to reapprove again the activities. They have a traffic light system, which is sort of, you know, red, you can't go, amber, you can go, but you maybe have to finish early because there's a risk of heat stroke, or green, which is, yeah, everything's fine. We're normally quite cautious with that. So if they give us an amber, we might say, actually, we're not going to risk it anyway. But it's a good way to check that there are other people, there are several organizations who are kind of checking each day what the group is up to. FZY also sets up during the summer like a website that tracks all the tour buses, so that you can kind of check where they were the last time that they were kind of checked in with and stuff like that. Each bus is like tracked by GPS, so that we know where they are all the time. And if for one reason or another, it could be because of weather or something political, different parts of the country become off limits, then we are quite good at having a whole lot of hostel rooms and activities kind of booked in backup, which is a nice option to be able to have. So if we just don't want to risk going somewhere for one reason or another, there are plenty of other places that we can go. The last thing on there is, and I'll talk about it more in a minute, is about the way we communicate to you as parents. We set up a whole load of different systems, which please God we won't have to use, but things like we can send out mass texts to lots of parents, or we have the capability to set up a call center. More often than not, when things kind of do happen that require updates, you'll receive immediate communication from us via email. So they're all the different things we do. We're quite good at keeping parents up to date. And then in terms of more of like the caring and welfare side of what we do, firstly, all the British Madrichim are first aid trained, and one of them is, there's always a first aid trained person with the group at all times. Also, all the medication is carried by the Madrichim, who are the leaders. We're quite lucky at FZY because we have an office in Israel. That means we have full-time staff on the ground there who spend much of the summer driving between groups. You'd be amazed. A lot of the stuff they do is kind of things like picking up flip-flops that were left at the beach and delivering them to hostels. But it's great that they are on the ground if we need them. And we also, kind of on that note, we have a social worker and a mental health expert, as well as different kind of medical experts and people from different backgrounds who we employ specifically in the summer to help out with things that might come up in terms of people's welfare and well-being during the program. So we have quite a good network in place, as well as, of course, like working with the UJIA and UJIA Israel experience to provide kind of the most holistic support that we can. And another thing, a lot of Chanachim, a lot of participants on the program do come in ahead of the program itself and might just chat with any of us in the office or even with some of their leaders about some concerns that they might have leading up to the summer. And there's no kind of negative stigma to that. Like, a lot of people do it, and for a lot of them it's just something that's easier once they kind of know that they're not going to need to tell anything scary to anyone during the program. We just kind of know it nicely in advance. Sorry, I kind of lost I think I pressed the wrong button there. So we kind of know people in advance, and we can provide kind of care plans for them as and when required. Whoops, sorry if I've just lost you there for a moment. I knew something was bound to go wrong. So there we were on kind of the caring and support side of things. And our Madrachim received kind of a lot of different parts of different training before the summer. We're looking into kind of extending the training this year and making it a little bit broader. But they are kind of well-trained and well-versed in terms of dealing with different people and their different social backgrounds, emotional backgrounds, and physical health and well-being as well. The last thing I'm going to say on this is a little bit about the staff and the staff structure on the program. So kind of at the top of the program, there's the tour director, who is me, and FZY also has an executive director who works on the ground in Israel. And it's good to have him there in the country, kind of as I mentioned before. We also work quite closely with the director of summer programs at Young Judea. They're the organization that facilitates all of the logistics on the ground in Israel, including the hiring of staff, but also things like coaches and food and accommodation. So the real kind of core logistics of the program. So we work together, the three of us, and then there are 2 or 3 rakazim, or coordinators. And each of those is responsible for 2 or 3 buses. And they might drive around between the buses and check that everyone's okay, and they can do things like, if someone's being told they have to stay at the doctor's for a few hours, they'll go keep them company. They can also be quite helpful at retrieving bags that have been left in the wrong locations and things like that. And ironing anything out that comes out, ironing out anything that comes up during the summer. And then each group also has 2 British Madrachim or leaders and 2 Israeli Madrachim or leaders. So it's 4 who are with the group at all times. And the last thing there is security, and the reason that's got an asterisk next to it is because there is only an additional 5th security person when groups are going somewhere that's kind of the advice given to us by the organizations that we work with in Israel. So a lot of places they go, it's not necessary because it's if they're in a city and there's lots of police or soldiers in the street or things like that. But sometimes the groups are in hikes in places where they do need a 5th person, and that can be kind of an extra security / first aid person. So not with the group at all times, but it's a good kind of bonus to have sometimes. So if we move on from that, the last thing about kind of the way we, this is something I'll go into more detail about later in the year in terms of how quickly we'll update you if someone's at the doctor's or if they're in trouble in terms of discipline or things like that. But fundamentally, the stuff you need to know now is that we will give you a daily update email every day of the program except Saturday, so except Shabbat. And that will have a bit of a blurb of what people did that day. And it should also include a quote of the kind of quote of the day. Someone will be asked to, so you can watch out for whoever you're watching out for. And I think grandparents in particular always enjoy the daily updates. And also the reason why they enjoy them so much is we kind of do a photo album for each group. So each day there'll be 20 or so new photos in that so that people can stay up to date during the summer. So it's a lovely way to kind of watch everyone have fun. It's certainly my highlight during the summer is getting those photos and seeing some of the experiences that people are having. So something to look forward to even for us who aren't going to be in Israel. Let's move on again. So the next kind of couple of things I'm going to talk about are, we're going to look at food and accommodation. It says what to expect, and there's a photo of someone holding some tomatoes. That's not because that's what to expect. It's actually a fun activity that some of the groups do where they go salad picking, basically, at an agricultural kibbutz. It's a good laugh. But in terms of food and accommodation, the way it works is most of the accommodation is in fairly basic but kind of very nice and clean hostels, youth hostels in Israel. Unlike the hostels that we might think about, Israel is very well versed at having these big groups and school trips and things like that. So they're kind of purpose built. They normally have rooms of between 3 and 5, and there's usually an ensuite bathroom in each room. So that's like the bulk of accommodation. Probably 3/4 of the nights on any program are spent in hostels like that, which, like I said, and they kind of are good, kind of 4 people, 5 people to a room, ensuite bathroom. They're just very nice and clean and good aircon, which is very important. The remaining kind of quarter, or probably a bit less, the remaining 20% or so of the nights take place in one of 2 kind of different places. So some of them are out camping, or like staying somewhere like in the desert where they stay in a big tent all together, which means people need to take like sleeping bags with them, as well as and people often pack in their big suitcase, kind of like a smaller duffel bag or overnight bag. So that happens probably 2 or 3 nights during the program. And the other place that some of the groups sometimes stay is somewhere between, it's like a boarding school during the year, and they work as hostels during the summer. And again, they're normally rooms of 4 or 5 with ensuite bathrooms. They're not luxury hotels that the groups stay at, but they aren't terrible either. And you can expect them to be kind of basic but clean. And they'll all have things like air conditioning, and most of them have Wi-Fi and things like that. So then they're really not so bad at all. In terms of food, I will talk a little bit about breakfast and dinner, and then I'll do lunch at the end because it's a bit different. So breakfast and dinner are almost always served in the hostels as kind of buffet meals. There's normally at breakfast in particular a huge variety of things to choose from, which is really good because we normally have very active days. So it's good that people can kind of fill up in the morning and really feel that they've got enough to get through the morning hike or whatever. We also, by the way, will always carry, the leaders will always carry on the bus just a few spare pieces of fruit or bottles of water or whatever's needed, just in case people don't get enough. But breakfast is normally like big salads or cereals, sometimes cooked breakfast. It's actually quite nice, the breakfast. And dinner as well is also normally buffet. We're not a vegetarian movement, so there's normally probably 2 meat options and at least 1 vegetarian option at each place. And we're also well adept at catering for people who might be intolerant to lactose or gluten or things like that. So it's nothing to worry about. Israeli dinners are kind of almost infamously, there's always schnitzel and rice and things like that, but there's also kind of loads of salad and hummus, and there's a whole variety of different things. Lunch is sometimes different because the groups are often out and about, which means that there's kind of a few different ways of doing lunch. Sometimes the groups get delivered to them while they're out and about a hot lunch, which are like school meals, similar food to the food they get at dinner time. Other times the group will be ordered all together, like a takeaway meal, like pizza for the whole group, that kind of thing. Another thing that we sometimes do at lunch is, depending on where they are, particularly if they're in Tel Aviv or Jerusalem, they go and spend lunchtime near a marketplace, and we show them where they can go and what they can eat, and we'll give each person a stipend. They'll get the monetary, the financial equivalent of a meal in cash, and in small groups they can go and treat themselves to whatever it is they fancy. Sometimes we do that in the evenings as well, depending on where we are and when we're out and about. The couple of things to bear in mind, there are a couple of times where meals aren't like that. So often when groups sleep out and about, breakfast is much more likely just to be like cereals and milk and not the whole thing. And the whole thing as well of like sleeping out, often we'll do like barbecues or something that's just a bit easier to make outdoors. There is like enough food each day. But we do ask that people bring water bottles and that they're responsible for kind of filling up their own water bottles and things like that. So that's food and accommodation. The next thing I want to look at a little bit is just people often ask, how can I ensure that my child goes with a friend or sometimes that they don't go with a friend? When you sign up for Israel Tour, the process opens on Monday, which is Monday the 26th. At first, we only ask you for things like name and date of birth and address and some very like basic details. Sometime later in the process, you receive a few more forms to fill out, including like medical forms and things like that. And one of those forms is a friend request form, and people can put down up to 3 names of people they'd like to be with. Now, we guarantee at least one of those names, but often, people are with at least 2 or 3 of their friends, and we try and keep people in groups of like 3 or 4, and then mix them up around the different tour groups. There's 40 people on each bus, give or take a few, and we try and make sure that people who might be from Leeds or Manchester, we don't want them to be or feel isolated on a bus, so we'll try and get 8 or 9 of them together on a group instead. And similarly, we try not to have any group of people from one single school to really kind of take over the bus either. We know that people go on Israel Tour to make new friends and to feel like they're in a new environment, and it can be quite daunting for the others when that happens. So we're quite good at avoiding that. The last thing I should say about kind of friend requests and groups and the groups that people are in is that if you have any kind of concerns or questions about that, I have a colleague in the office called Ruth, who is responsible for the process. And if there's anything you'd like to flag up early, I know that some people can't be with certain other participants, but that's definitely something we can bear in mind in advance. So I just move on to kind of the penultimate thing. I just wanted to give all of the key details that I can. So at the top of this slide, you can see the dates for next summer. Now, the reason there are 3 flight days for departure and return is because we often take upwards of 6, 7, or 8 different tour buses, and there just aren't enough flights to Israel each day for us all to fly out on the same day. So these are the kind of itemized dates, and that might be more helpful. We do say that even these dates are still subject to change by a day or 2 on either side. So it's worth just bearing that in mind for people who are booking other things. And the reason for that is because El Al, who are the airline, they can often make changes at fairly last minute without that much notice. But these are the dates we're working with. For a lot of people, the question comes up each year about, do they have to fly back with the group? And the answer to that is no. And in due course, people who've signed up will receive their flight change online form. And they can just fill it out and there are kind of a couple of different options. People can either cancel the return flight or the inbound flight, or they could change the return flight. A cancellation is often what happens when someone has already got a flight booked, a return flight booked with another airline, and people change or edit the return flight when they would like to fly back still with El Al, kind of still with the flights that we've booked them, but at a later date or a different date. The one thing to bear in mind with this is that that deadline happens in March, and then after that, you'll still be able, we won't really be able to affect those changes for you. People who do fill out that form before March will be able to receive, I think, yeah, sorry, I was just trying to work out myself. they do receive a refund, a partial refund of some of the money for the flight. That doesn't come through until later in the year. Sign up for the program opens online on our website this Monday. The reduced price is £3,375, and that goes up on Friday the 18th of January. And there's a deposit of £500, which the deadline for which is Monday the 4th of February. We are also able, there's a lot of financial assistance for Israel Tour. I think I'm right in saying that between a quarter and a third of people who go on the program have some sort of financial assistance, and we deal with that confidentially in the office. It wouldn't even be me who knows about it. It goes to a colleague of mine, and they will be able to tell you a little bit more about the process if you do want to get in touch with the office about financial assistance. Finally, because I didn't want to end on the boring details, I just thought I'd look a little bit at some photos from last year, and in particular from last year's Maccabea. It's kind of like a sports and it's a sports competition, talent show, barbecue, disco, water sports. It's the whole lot. It happens kind of on the shores of the Sea of Galilee, the Kinneret, and it's where all of the groups come together, and it's like a really nice atmosphere, a really lovely spirit on the day, and it's just one of the highlights for a lot of people is when they all see each other. I should say that the groups, they do normally travel around fairly isolated, one group at a time, but because there are only so many hostels in Israel, and because we take 7 or 8 different groups out each year, what's normally the case is that most evenings in a hostel, there's at least 1, normally 2 FZY groups who are there. So what that means is that in the evening, group 1 and group 3 might be staying in the same place for a few nights, and then group 3 might leave, and group 4 arrive, and then group 1 leave. But normally there are a couple of different groups staying in the hostels at the same time. So just before I close, thank you to those of you who've been watching. I hope it hasn't been too clunky. I'm about to watch it back and find out. If there's anyone who has any questions, you're more than welcome. There's either a little chat box on the side of the YouTube video, and you're more than welcome to pop them there, or you can get in touch with us in the office. My email is josh@fzy.org.uk, and our phone number is, you can see it all on our website and things like that. So you're more than welcome to get in touch with us. We love talking to people about Israel Tour. I should just say that as someone who has led the program a couple of times, it really is like a fantastic experience. I know at the moment people might be deciding between different tour programs, and all I would say is that I know that people, you know, whoever you end up making the decision to go with, I'm sure you'll have a fantastic time. I can't speak for the others because I've not done them, but I just do know that I think a lot of it is about the, you know, I think the way that the community takes over 1,000 people to Israel each year is really a massive credit. It's an amazing experience for people kind of in different ways, socially, or people learn more, people see their Jewishness in a different way. And so it really is kind of full of potential. Thank you very much if you've been joining me, and no worries if not. This video will stay online for you to watch for a few months at least. If there's anything else, please do get in touch. Thank you.